At this point, I'm going to assume that you have the documents downloaded somewhere from the website, somewhere on your computer, and then have them in a folder, and they are uncompressed, that is unzipped, so 2016, 2017, so on and so forth. What we're going to do is we're going to open up a new Eclipse project, and we're going to import all of the data files so that we have all the data files, and then do what's called a dry run, which is a sample program that allows you to read from a file and then process the input. So let's go ahead and we'll pick the 2016 data set to start with. So I'm going to go over here to Eclipse, and I'm going to say File, New Java Project. I'll say, call this maybe 2016 UIL demo. Now, at this point, I might not even say, I might be even more specific than that. If you remember, there's an invitational A, an invitational B, district, regional, and state. Okay, so there's 5 different problem sets for 2016. It might make the most sense if we just say invitational A demo. Okay, well, we'll go through the process again, or you create a new one, it's up to you. So, that's how I'm going to add the word demo into mine. Alright, the next thing that we're going to want to do is we are going to import all of the data files. If you remember, whenever you run your programs, they will provide you with some sample data files, which is great, that you'll be able to test run everything, but then you'll need to, are we recording here, Rosa?
Yeah. Okay.
But and you test to make sure your program works properly. When you submit it, then they will have the secret judging data files as well. As luck would have it, we also have the judge files available, but the workflow that I would recommend is write your program to match the sample data. Then you think of extra situations, try to think, how could they be tricky and sneaky, and change the sample data file accordingly, okay? Predict what your results are. Then after you are basically mirror or match the entire sequence that you would have during the competition. Then after you are 100% satisfied, you think this is going to work no matter what, then try running it with the judging data. And I'll show you at some point later on how to do that. You can just overwrite it or whatever, you can copy and paste it. But then try running with the judging data and be like, oh, why didn't it work? Because it probably won't work with the judging data, at least the first time you try it. And that will start to give you an idea about where your thought process ends in terms of test data and where theirs begins. Okay, and what other situations you need to think about. So you really have to go through that thought process. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to right click here, and we are going to import all of those data files. So in fact, let me double check, make sure we're in the right location. I think it might be better, judging from this, let's look at the navigator. There's a right way and a wrong way to do this, okay? And this is the right way, okay. So what you can do, here's the things that you don't want to happen. You don't want these data files to be in the wrong folder. You want them to be in the right location. I found that if you just right click on the project itself, that's going to work out as well. If you go to the Navigator tab, then you can actually see the 2 different folders: the bin, which is the binary, the class files, the SRC, which is the source. If you right click on the project itself, then it will put it in at the project level rather than in those other 2 places. And on Eclipse, it needs to be at the project level. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to import a bunch of those files. So I'm going to say import, and we're going to just import files from the file system. So then we'll go to File System, and this is asking for the directory that we're going to import from. For me, that's in my documents, and then I have, I think it's a UIL folder, and I am going to find the 2016, and then I'll go to invitational A, and then student data. If I look there, I'm starting to see all kinds of stuff. Yeah, so I'll click the student data folder. So the 2016 programs, then invitational A, student data, and I'm going to select that particular folder. You should, they're all grayed out, all the different files. They're the .dat files and whatnot. So I'll click open. I'll come check in a second. What that should show you now here is all the different data files, and I might just select all of those, but then scroll down and see if there's any that don't belong there. Okay. Question?
I was just remembering this.
Right. Okay. It's helpful to go through the workflow at least once, just because you're gonna have to do this for the invitational B, for the district, for 2017. You see what I'm saying? So. And we've got select all, and then I'll hit finish. All right. So if we look at these and double click on any of these, they're just text files. And I mean, Eclipse is a text editor, so you can edit them however you want. Where's the A1? Is there one of them here? We have A2. Anyway, you can change this from 10 and then save it. And you can change any of these that you want. And that's what's helpful. I'd recommend to change these after it works for the data that's given. Start adding some other stuff onto it. Okay. All right. Next, I'm going to go back here to in Finder. I'm going to actually find that 2016 invitational A, and I'm going to go to the student packet. Let's see if this is right. Invitational A. That's why there was no A1s, because this first one is just a fun little loop thing. Okay. All right. One of the things that they provide is, if you look here at the very bottom, there's a dry run.dat. Let me pause yours. Rosa, what's up?
I found it.
You didn't know where it was saved? You have the files?
Yeah.
Yep. You have all the files? There we go. What's that?
So much. Why do they have codes?
AP doesn't know. Or do they?
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna have to adjust the file type on hers.
Oh,
I got it. There's
Yeah,
a bunch
they're
of
there
codes.
now.
If you double click on it, does it open up?
Oh
It
God.
should.
I think it's gonna open up VLC.
Is that good?
No.
No,
Oh.
not
We
at all.
we need to associate that file with Eclipse. We can do that here in a second. Just that's not as important as what we're about to do right now. Okay. All right. So let's see. It's interesting they're not including that
You're so different.
on this one here.
How come yours aren't?
All right. Whatever. Let's go ahead and open up a web browser here. And let's type in UIL Comp Sci. UIL Computer Science. First link there. This is the UIL Computer Science page. It's got lots of good resources about how the contest works. It's got some links over here. Some of those links I've already downloaded and I've thrown into the folder. What we want to do is we want to go all the way, well, let's see, this right over here. On the right side, UIL CS resource page. They do have some links here for extra resources. There's some people that have some videos, the latest version of Java. What we want here at the very bottom is this file right here. Can I help you real quick, Ivan?
Yes. Did I have all my assignments in?
I don't know right now. We're having a club meeting. I'll
Oh, okay.
catch you
All
in a
right.
bit.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. So they've got it here at the very bottom. They've got a sample of, this says scores scanner, of how to read the dry run file. That's really frustrating that they should have had all that. Well, all right. What we're gonna do is we're gonna grab our, we'll do it ourselves. Okay. So let's go back to Eclipse, and we're gonna make a file that's going to read, or a program that's gonna read from here. We'll call it dry run. So click over here on source, right click, new, and we'll say class dry run, one word. Capitalization doesn't matter, but I'm gonna have capital D and R. Finish that. Oh, make sure you definitely do have a public setting. Void main. Alright, let's see here. Find another one that we have. Alright, first thing you're going to need to have up here is an import statement. Import java.io.file. Now, funny story, we went to the competition last year and they said, here's the dry run, see if you can work it. And our students, the three we had, they could write some pretty complex stuff, but they could not get this dry run sucker to set it to get up right. So like every other time I just copy and pasted it. Okay? We're gonna copy and paste it right now, but you need to get in the habit of being able to do this stuff from memory because you'll have one textbook, maybe two, that you can utilize. Alright? But you can't have any handwritten notes. You can't have anything printed off or anything like that. So the next thing that we're gonna have is tacked on here to the end of our public static void main. We're gonna have to have the throws IO exception. And the reason is because we're about to open up a file. And anytime you open up a file, you need to be able to handle if the file doesn't open properly. And that means you either process it yourself or you throw it to the next person up the ladder. In this case, we're gonna throw it to the next person up the ladder. So throws IO exception. I, O, and E, the first E there are all capitalized. Now when I did that, it also imported java.io.exception. One way that you could eliminate all of that stuff is if you say import java.io.star. It's just going to make available the entire input-output package. Next, we're going to create a scanner object. So we'll call it S. Scanner S equals new scanner, and then instead of putting system.in, we're going to create a file object. So we'll say new file, and we'll put the name of the file, dryrun.dat, inside the quotes. So normally the scanner objects that we have allows us to pull in information from the keyboard because it's attached to system.in object. Now this is attached, or it's constructed rather, with a file object, particularly dryrun.dat. So we can do anything with this S that we normally do with keyboard. So we could say S dot next line, and I can store that in a string. String str equals s dot next line. And then I can print that out. System.out.println str. What this should do is it should read the first line from that file and then print that out to the output. The other thing we want to do is just good practice is to close our scanner. It's not gonna throw an error if we don't, but it'll throw us a warning if we don't. So if everything works properly, when I run this, in my console down here, I should see printed out the first line of that file. In my case, it's 4. I go over here to the dry run, and I see that if you double click on that dry run file, you'll see that it is in fact 4. I could change it to a 45, and then save it, go to dry run, run that, and you should get 45 down there as well. Is it working for you?
Yeah, I got 4.
So go and open up the dry run file, and let's make it, oh, you can't.
No.
We'll fix that here in a second. Alright, let's go back and change it back to a 4.
What? How'd you get 45? Oh.
Okay, so let's start going, kicking this into higher gear. Alright, sometimes they'll say there's going to be an input file, and you don't know how many lines it's going to have. Alright, but you need to print out every single line that's on that input file. Okay? What sort of a loop would you use? Yeah, you'd use a while loop if you didn't know how many times you'd go through. So we're going to do this. We're going to put a while in front here, but how do we know how to continue? We don't know how long the file is. Well, you can say s dot, and boom, it's right the very first one. Has next line.
You can do that?
Yep. And then I might do a nice little source. What is it? Format. Arrow shift. And then I put I put brackets around this, so as long as there's another line in there, read through that and print it out. There it is. Yep. Now, nice thing, Rosa, you can't do this, but we can. We can say, you know, this is what it looks like. We got a meeting right now, Marcos.
Huh?
We got a meeting right now.
Oh.
Sorry. This is what it looks like when you add more lines. Just putting some more lines on there. I go back to the dry run, and I run it.
Stuck with cabbages.
Yeah, sorry. So that's the first thing. Whenever you know that, when you don't know how many lines there's going to be. Okay. Now, there's a reason why there's a 4 there, because a lot of times they'll say something like the first number of the file, or the first line, will be a number which will tell you how many lines there's going to be in the file. Okay? And then there's going to be that number of lines. Okay, so you don't really necessarily need a while statement. What you could do is the very first thing you could do is you could say int num lines equals s dot. I know that it's going to be an integer. It's an integer on there. They told me it's going to be an integer. So I can just say, how do we read integers from a scanner?
Next int.
Yeah, next int. And now, since I know how many lines there's going to be, I don't need a while loop. I can use a for loop. If I want to loop through 4 times, I say for int I equals 0, I less than 4, I plus plus. Remember, you always start counting off at 0, you put the less than rather than less than or equal to, and you put the number of times you want to loop. If I had 5, then I put a 5 right there. If I have number of lines, then I put num lines. If you ever start to look through the sample programs that they have written as solutions, for whatever reason, they don't they don't do that. They count down. I don't know why they count down, but they just say like, they say I equals the number of lines while I is greater than 0, I minus minus, or they use T for test cases and stuff like that. Anyway, this should still work. Notice I have a blank line right there because the next int didn't read that whole entire line. Okay, so
Rachel Foley to the office, please. Rachel Foley.
some things that you could see will work if you want to just grab the whole line. You just say s dot next line, and then you cast this string, which is as it's currently is 4 double quotes. You can't not cast it, but you parse it as an int. If you remember, that's using the integer dot parse int. And we're actually in programming 2, we'll review that today. But the parse int takes a string as an argument and will convert it into an integer or a double. That's nice because you're using the next line and it's sending, you know, the buffer, or it's processing that whole thing that's going to go to the next line. You don't have to have dummy reads and stuff like that and get all mixed up. I do like this method here. Okay. And let's go ahead and I'm going to skip through here. We have just a couple minutes. I don't know why they're all on the hallways. Let's look at this one right here. Number 2, input, a data file with several values of n arranged vertically, where n is between 5 and 10,000. So you can see the sample input here. They're not going to tell you how many test cases. What sort of code would you use to read that input? Nick? What mechanism would you use? What sort of loop would you use to pull it? A while loop, yeah. While has the next line. Boom, there it is. Let's go down to this one. Sample input. A data file with several sets of data. Each data is a series of integers all on one line with single space separation. So you would grab that whole line and then process it. Then grab that whole line. Once again, they don't tell you how many lines or whatever. So, Nick, use a while loop. Let's find the one that I'm looking for here. Sample input. Going down all the way through. Yep, another while loop. They don't tell you how many. I'm trying to find one where they. Same there. Sometimes they actually. Well, this one looks like it's pretty straightforward. Sample input. Here we go. This one's good. Input. The first line will have an initial integer n indicating the n data sets that follow. In each data set, the first line will contain an integer indicating the number of Wikipedia articles in this data set. Each article will take up one line starting with a single string as title. Okay, so let's go down here. This one right here, the first line is the number of data sets. So we see a 2. So how many data sets are there? 2 data sets. Here is the first data set. The first line is a number, which then tells you how many items there are going to be that follows. Then there's the 6, which tells you how many lines there are right there. Then, I don't know what the heck all this is. I think there's more to it than that. Each article will take anyway, then there's some more stuff like that. But hopefully you can see there, you grab this number right up here, and that would be one loop, which would be counting the number of test cases. Then this 9, you would have another loop, which would be pulling from, that would go through to grab each one of those. This one's just going to be another while loop. This one's going to be another while loop. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Just grabbing, the while loop is going to be your best friend. Next time we'll talk about is how to, if they give you a big string with a bunch of stuff you've got to split up, we'll talk about how to split it up using split. And maybe even just go ahead and try one or two of these. That might be a better idea. Also, my hope is in the upcoming week or two, I want to give you all a series of challenges of increasing difficulty, okay, that will kind of build their way up to some of these. I had some of those last year. I want to kind of add on to those. The other thing I'm looking at, hopefully purchasing sometime within the month, is an online practice system similar to Coding Bat, but more geared for UIL stuff. And that way, if you want to have some extra practice and things like that, then it'll give you that, as well as grade the program. So you can even type the whole thing in online. You don't have to go through Eclipse and stuff like that. I think that's kind of silly. I like using Eclipse, but that'll give you some quick practice. All right? Okay. Feel free to start working on some of those, or at least reading through those programs. There's some pretty interesting stuff there. Yes, Nick. Do you have a question? No? Okay. Go and kill that if you don't mind.